Hi, it's Sandy Wiley. Welcome to my mental health channel, where I talk about psychology, my life as a patient, doing therapy at 20 years, and we focus on Freud, Jung, and a lot of personal mental illnesses. I try to normalize them. I try to take the stigma away from mental illness. I'm going to go in today about my own story with three narcissistic psychologists. Okay, and I summed it up in this book. I've also written other books. Love Bombed by a Harvard psychologist and Emails of an Unethical Psychologist, as well as Love Outside the Boundaries, which cover my 2-year affair with one of my psychologists. Now, I want to explain how my story is very different. And before I go into it, I just want everyone to please be very kind in the comments. Don't be calling me or anyone else names in the comments. I don't care if you disagree with me. You don't have to agree with everything I say, but you do need to be kind. Don't be mean, because a lot of people write nasty things and don't show respect. And I won't tolerate that. So be kind in the comments. What happened to me was one of a kind. Yes, I was severely sexually exploited and abused. In therapy. I will never ever go to therapy again. Therapy destroyed my life. I turned into an alcoholic in my 50s. Never had a problem with alcohol before my 50s. I drank maybe one glass of beer, a glass of wine. I never had a problem with alcohol, is what I'm saying, my whole life. I mean, I never drank every day. I drank maybe, I never had a problem. And then I started drinking vodka, like 5 martinis, and get drunk every night on vodka, because I was re-traumatized by my psychologist. Not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4. I mean, practically every one of them ruined my life. But there was 3 that I mentioned in this book. Dr. Richard Geist from Harvard, and he still teaches and practices. He charges over $300 an hour. Dr. James Barbaria from Duquesne, he passed away in 2017. And Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang from Yale University. Now, these are some big Ivy League schools, all right? These are psychologists that were practicing for, over 30 or 40 years. They weren't some, fresh doctor out of college. These were men, these were professional doctors from Ivy League, Harvard, Yale, who had been practicing, when I was going to therapy with them, 30, 40 years in practice, okay? So it wasn't some, redneck who just got off the bus, all right? I know that, it's not unheard of for patients to be sexually abused. For therapists are never supposed to have sex with their patients, never. Let me just put that right out there. It's considered statutory rape, all right? Sex is never part of therapy, ever, 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 okay? So I just want to put that out there. You're a vulnerable person. I was vulnerable. I was going to a doctor for mental health. I was seeking a doctor for my mental health. Okay? This person was a professional person who went to college for many, many years, got a doctorate degree, took an oath, do no harm. They take an oath. They're trained, that they cannot have sex with patients. They're trained in that. In half the states in the United States, they go to jail All right. It's not just, it's criminal. All right. It's not just they lose their license. Like in Massachusetts, they lose their license. But in other states, they go behind bars. All right. This state, I don't know what's wrong with this state. I'm trying to get that law changed. But I want to tell my story because it is truly one of a kind. And there is not another person that has had this happen to them. Okay? I went to Dr. Richard Geis in 2005 after my parents died back to back. I was 38 years old. My father died of cancer and my mother died of heart failure within 3 months of each other. I was 38. I had a traumatic brain injured son who was in the hospital for 2 years, who lost his mind to pneumococcal meningitis and never got his mind back and needed to be institutional. He's still institutionalized to this day. My cousin came in and stole my inheritance. I needed a lawyer for that. I needed another lawyer to fight the Boston public school system so that my son could, because we didn't have the money for his care, you know. He eventually went to the May Center, which is an institution for children who have neurological issues. Like my son had traumatic brain injury. I could not take care of my son at home because he needed round-the-clock 24/7 care. He was a complete invalid. He needed one of these places. The Boston school system eventually paid for it because I had to fight them. So I was fighting the Boston school system to help my son. I had a lawyer for that. I had a lawyer because my cousin stole my inheritance. I had a lawyer for that. Then I had to get a lawyer because I sued my psychologist and won a big settlement because he had sex with me, which is rape. But see, at the time I didn't know it was I didn't know that until people told me that, you know, you were going for help. You were a vulnerable patient. He took advantage of you. He was in a position of power, like a parent. A parent doesn't have, you know, a parent or a guardian. You see what I'm saying? It's the same thing. They're in a position of power. So I went to him, you know, I was not doing bad when I went to Dr. Richard Geis. I went downhill from him alone. I had a job. I just bought a house. I had friends. I had best friends, best girlfriends for years. I was social. I went to parties. I didn't have any drinking drinking? So I consider myself pretty good compared to how I turned out after these psychologists got their hands on me. Literally got their hands on me. So Dr. Geis, he let me sit in his lap. He let me, you know, he encouraged me to, you know, touch his body. I grabbed his manhood, if you know what I'm saying. I can't say it on YouTube. He invited me to his house in Maine. You know, I covered that in my last video, re-traumatized by a narcissistic psychologist. All right. Then what happened was I got a job, so I mean, I saw him 5 hours a week, but I got a job. I had a job as a security guard, and so I had to take time away. I couldn't go 5 hours because I was working. And then he told me, he lied to me. He told me he had to drive his daughter to basketball practice, but I found out later that he didn't. He gave my session away to another patient. I found it out because as I'm leaving, I saw during my session time another patient go in, and I confronted him about it. And he said, oh, I don't have to drive my daughter every week. Some stupid excuse. But anyway, he allowed me to do things, invited me to Maine on vacation. And I said all this before. But because I was only seeing him for so little, and I saw him less and less. We went from 5 hours to 2 hours to 1 hour. And I kept leaving, coming back, threatening the licensing board because I didn't think he was ethical. Eventually, I started seeing him a half an hour every week, which wasn't enough at that time because I was used to 5 hours a week. You know what I mean? So I started seeing other psychologists, and one of them was Dr. James Barbaria. Dr. James Barbaria was drop dead gorgeous. All right, he was six pack, bulging muscles, biceps. He was handsome, and he was Italian like me. He was Catholic like me. He had severe anxiety like me. There was like, we were just like, how you meet your twin flame. And, I really fell for him, and he obviously fell for me. And I talked about him with Dr. Richard Geist and told him what was going on. Now, Dr. Richard Geist said, oh, you should ask him to go to bed. This is what he said. Ask him to go upstairs and go to bed with you. Tell him it'll be fun. Ask him if he's in love with you. He goes, oh, I know plenty of psychologists who have sex with their patients, In fact, I see them, I counsel them about their relationship. Can you believe that? So what happened was, Dr. James Barbaria started having a sexual relationship with me, his patient. Now, he physically abused me, pushed me around, spit in my face, swore at me, told me I was responsible for his patients. They both told me I could never go to the board. And get this, he wanted to see Dick, Dr. Richard Geist. The one I was having a sexual affair with wanted to see my other one, the Harvard one, Dr. Richard Geist. So I gave up my own session with Dr. Richard Geist and let Dr. James Barbaria, the one I'm having an affair with, go. And then eventually he got his own session, his own time with Dr. Geist. And he said, let's go together for couples counseling. Can you believe that? So I'm in the room with two of my psychologists, all right? Two in the same room. The Harvard one, who I saw since 2005, Dr. Richard Geist, and the Duquesne one, Holy Cross, who I was having a sexual affair with while married. This guy would drive to my house while my young son was in the living room and my husband, and they saw him pick me up in his, convertible, his sports car, his black convertible sports car. He would arrogantly, he's narcissistic. All these psychologists are narcissistic. He picked me up in front of my house every Saturday night. And I went in his convertible. He took me out to expensive restaurants, and then we went back to his place. We saw movies. Between the sheets, you know what I'm saying. And every Sunday, we'd walk around the Arboretum in Jamaica Plain. Brookline. Yeah. So, and we'd go, and both of them would see me. We'd drive to Newton, because that's where Dr. Geist's office, his home office. All of these shrinks had home offices, first of all. That's the number one thing you have to watch out for. Home offices. Because when they have a home office, no one can see what goes on, all right? Because it's out of their home. Dr. Richard Geist in Newton, out of his home. Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang from Yale, out of his home. Dr. James Barbaria, out of his home, out of his $1 million condo in Jamaica Plain. So that's the number one thing. Most of these psychologists, not all of them, okay? A lot of them still have sex with their patients in their in offices, not out of their homes. But it's very easy to abuse a patient when there's no one around. This is your house, okay? This is your practice in your house, and there's no one else. No one can see, okay? You see what I'm saying? If they worked in an office with other psychologists or other doctors, people could see things, or you know what I mean? They might get suspicious of certain things. But when it's out of your home, nobody knows, right? Nobody. And so because I was now in this pseudo relationship with Jim, Dr. James Barbaria, I got another psychologist, Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang from Yale. And I started seeing him. Okay? So I was seeing Dick for free. I was dating Jim. And my insurance covered, excuse me, Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang from Yale. Now I started talking about Jim to Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang. So guess what? He wanted to see him. Now I'm in, now get this, because this is where my story is not like anybody else's, all right? Now I bring Jim, my psychologist, not only to my psychologist, Dick, but now to my other psychologist, Jeffrey Fortgang. So now there are 3 psychologists, all right? 3. And Jim goes to me. Jim and I go to Dr. Geist. Jim and I go to Dr. Fortgang. Are you getting that now? So it just gets more and more and more bizarre. That's why I write these books, because I want people to see me, and I want to share what happened to me. I mean, I was really traumatized. Dr. Geist did really do this. A metal chain around my neck and pulled me like a dog. I read this before, so I'm not going to read it again because I read it in another book. But the first page is, I'm a dog. I mean, I put everything in here. I write how I got into OnlyFans, pornos. I write that in here, how I did these X-rated videos, how I got into that, how I started turning into an alcoholic, how I started stealing. Now remember, before I went to any psychologist, before I went to any, never had any alcohol problem. Never took my clothes off. Never did those kind of videos, if you know what I mean. Never stole anything. This all happened in my 50s. Why? Because these psychologists ruined my life. It wasn't just one. This is how I'm trying to get my story out. How dangerous it is to go to these doctors. How they can ruin your life. I am a living proof. I was a somewhat together person before I went into therapy. I never stole anything. I never drank vodka. I never drank every day. I might have like a beer or two on a Saturday with pizza. Like the most I drink is maybe 2 beers a week. Now I was drinking 4 or 5 vodka drinks, 4 or 5 martinis every single day, 7 days a week. I'm stealing. I'm doing porno videos out there, you know. I have insomnia. I couldn't sleep for days on end. These doctors ruined my life. This is why I'm trying to bring my story across. I'm trying to get people to see exactly what happened to me, you know. Last year I made a board complaint against Dr. Richard Geist. It still hasn't been resolved. It's still in the process of being reviewed by the board. So after 1 year, nothing is resolved. Okay? I think that, you know, if I could help people see the exploitation, and I'll keep doing this until I die, because this is my life's mission. I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through, you know. And it's hard when you have Yale and Harvard. You have these doctors from the best colleges out there, Ivy League, Yale, Harvard. You have these, and they all ganged up on me, you know. 3 of them, you know. 3 of them ganged up on me. Dr. Jeffrey Fortgang, he was unethical too. He allowed me in his home. He sang Sinatra to me and played the piano. I was in his living room. It just gets so bizarre. I mean, I can't, you know, I would be talking hours and hours on this video about it if I go into every single detail that happened. But these doctors encouraged me to have this unethical relationship. They encouraged it, and they bullied me. They said I could not talk. The three of them bullied me. They ganged up on me. I was in the same room with them, you know, in the same room with these psychologists, all of them together. Well, Dick and Jim together, and then Dick and Jeffrey together. And they told me, you can never, ever go to the board, ever. They bullied me into silence. But guess what? I got mouth, baby. You know how they say baby got back? Well, I got mouth. And eventually I came out. And I'm coming out on my YouTube, on my mental health channel, to tell people that you need to, you need to be hyper vigilant if you ever do go to therapy. I'll never go to therapy again in my life because I was just tortured, really. I mean, yeah, Jim was physically abusive to me. He kidnapped me. He kidnapped me. He would not let me leave his house. I tried to run out the door, and he blocked all the doors. He took me, forcefully threw me on his couch. He wouldn't let me leave, okay? That's holding someone against their will. I mean, I've written it all in these books. And I just want to say that, it doesn't matter what college they go to. It doesn't matter how many years in practice. It doesn't matter their reputation, because let me tell you, Dr. Richard Geist has an awesome reputation. I mean, he gives speeches throughout the whole country. People know his name, all right? He's written many books. He has an impeccable reputation, all right? It doesn't matter people's reputation. You don't know anyone. Let me tell you straight up. It doesn't matter their reputation. You don't know anyone until you get behind closed doors. Like, the Charlie Rich song says, no one knows what goes on behind closed doors. You don't know a thing. They could have an impeccable reputation. They can be renowned. They can, write books, and they can be... Dr. Geist is a millionaire. He's a millionaire, okay? A millionaire. Between his wife and him make $500,000. So that's $1 million together, right? Their house is a couple of $1 million. I mean, they're millionaires. You don't know anything, all right? I know because I was severely abused. I was there behind closed doors, So guess what? It's my word against his word. But I have backup because I've kept everything. That's another thing you need to do. Don't throw anything away. Any email, any phone call, whatever, save it. You can save phone messages too. I did with Jim. I saved phone messages and use them as evidence. I saved every card. I saved every email of Dick and Jim's and Jeffrey's. And I made books on them. I mean, I just copied and pasted the emails into the books. And I didn't edit them. They're unabridged, unedited. I just copied and pasted. And I made one book about Jim and one book about Dick. Just copying and pasting from my inbox. Save everything. Because remember, that's evidence. And you might not think you need evidence in the beginning. But trust me. Don't throw anything away. Ever. Save everything, because you might need it someday. And I did. I still have all the emails back from 2005. I have every single email. And I gave that to the licensing board. So I hope, you know, that I've shed some light on this subject. It needs to be talked about. This is statutory rape. Okay, this is abuse. This is abuse. These psychologists ganged up on me, all right? They tried to keep me quiet, but they didn't. Don't ever let anyone take your voice. Don't ever let anyone take your voice away.